So you wrote me, and I'm back with James O. James O wrote me and said that he felt like there was a lot more to discuss with warm embrace, and I also wish that we had gotten more time. So I'm curious, like, what was the first thing you sort of thought of, like, when you were like, oh, I wish we would have talked about that part of it.
So before we ran out of time, I was just like babbling away and, got in whatever we're talking about. So the one key thing that I should have mentioned, but I didn't get to, is that so I first started the group. It really started it off as a like my emotional immediate reaction to whatever I to realize that was going on, and more specific to the incident that I came to learn about, and that really like upset me. Really. Uh, so I think when even if your intention is good, you involve too much of your emotion. I think the way you do things can be affected in a negative way. So uh, at first, I had this thought of like, you know, being really punitive. So it's more of like I was more focused on finding, perpetrators, like, bringing them to justice, like, that sort of thing, right? You know, wanted to get them off the scene. And um, even though I think uh, there are maybe cases that calls for that, and I think ultimately we really need to focus on uh, like making a room for rehabilitation. You know, like in our society too. Like you do something wrong, you don't send the person to jail for life, or you don't throw like you give them, obviously you have to show remorse and pay back the price, uh, uh, said crime, and then you get second life. And you know um, so just like that, I think we really need to uh, like if someone did something wrong, and uh, I think there are consequences, right? There has to be acknowledgement of the person that done something wrong. Like we have to like get them to get to take that step, because that's really the first step. And it's in for both parties, both like uh, uh, perpetrator and the survivor, to have a step taken, because that's on this side is first step, and on this side is first step of rehabilitation. Without that, like no none other step can be taken. Right? You can just skip over to like, oh, I just want my like punishment, then be done with this.
Yeah.
Like if you don't know what wrong, then that punishment is kind of pointless, because you're gonna come back and make same mistake again, possibly.
Yeah. And I would say right now we have an environment where possibly the consequences seem so severe for admitting to any wrongdoing or anything in that area that, like, of course a person would be scared to admit to anything, right? To even to take a look at their own behavior, be willing to admit that they have a place to learn from,
Sure.
because right now I feel like the environment is yeah, it's what you're talking about, where it's really it's punitive, it's expulsionary, I guess. There isn't really a clear path. I think it has a lot to do with organizers, honestly. Like as an organizer, what are my choices available when I hear about an incident like this? I'm certainly not qualified to, or at least seems like I'm not qualified to lead some kind of therapy session between the two people or to lead um, some kind of rehabilitation process. So then my only option becomes to not have that person come anymore. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. You start to wonder because it sounds like what you're talking about is transformative justice as opposed to the punitive justice, which is what we've got right now. And we're so used to, yeah, sort of like the punishing and like the making sure people are held accountable and that we like root out the problems. Yeah, right now we don't really have any process for, again, recognizing that the perpetrators, who are usually men, are also suffering under patriarchy and under this sort of unhealthy, yeah, this an unhealthy environment in the same ways. I mean, the responsibility is different. You know, one person has hurt the other person, but a lot of times, what was going on with that guy, who it's often a guy, um, yeah, he at no point in his life has he been given the resources to understand why his behavior is problematic. And I think in this case talking more about the people, like when it's more of a gray area. I mean, I know that in
Sure.
Tango we also have people that are just outright assaulting. Um, the bulk of the problem, I think, more is in gray area sexual harassment and not understanding boundaries and consent.
Right. So, just pick since you mentioned yeah. So there, I agree with you. There are like far more great areas than really like clear cut cases. Um, um, so I thought a lot about this, and I have no issue with people like you know you know doing whatever they want, like as long as there's a mutual consent, uh, and which is not affected by like some sort of like you know uh like you know uneven power dynamics and
Right.
like I think like so for example like you know Clinton got impeached for having sex with the argument was that like well he denied that then it was mutual, right? But they can how mutual can that be, right? Like she was giving consent. I mean, that's really big, like power gap.
Yeah, an
And
age, job, basically every way
right,
possible.
yeah. So I think we do need to take like things into consideration. So for example, like newbie in Tango scene comes to us and um, got chased by a teacher, right? And, like if you don't know, you don't know what is norm and what is not, and I think that's kind of like we're talking about here. And just to be safe, maybe like if you're a teacher, like maybe you should be extra. And um, but so the area, I think like it's very rare that someone jumps from like uh like trying to ask the dance floor uh, to like flat out assault, right? I think there's steps. Like it's kind of um, like if you try something, works, and then I think it's a kind of human nature. You always kind of like try to step it up
Yeah.
and push the envelope further and further.
Yeah.
And so I think it's better to have uh, certain guidelines that are universally like that are accepted in tango scenes, like you know nationwide or even worldwide, and that everyone kind of knows and understand when you on into the scene, you understand that's código. Like everyone knows what código is, right? Like everyone knows how cabeceo work. So by not like, but most people, do follow, and they know they understand what that is, and just like why can't we have some sort of a guideline for like what is considered appropriate, in the scene, and what is, and um so have everyone understand, and kind of like um I mean, we're not gonna sign for it, but like we can educate like the mass and display it everywhere, you
Yeah.
go. So
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, yeah, there. I mean, just like in the culture at large, like, yeah, I'm often reminded how tango is just a microcosm of our society in a lot of ways. There is not an understanding of a basic understanding of consent and consent as a spectrum, right? And it's that same. I feel like it's that same. So right now, like, if a woman has to, I want to try. I don't want to make it gendered if possible. If someone has to accuse somebody else of like, yeah, assault or harassment, it's almost like they have to label that person a bad person, right? And I've found a lot that people come to me and they want to report things, but they don't actually want to report it because they feel like that the consequences are too much. They don't want this person to be seen as a bad person or as a predator, or because they don't think that. um, and then also, yeah, you have like an unwillingness on the behalf of people to not admit if they've made mistakes, right? Because it's right now it's black or white. Like you're bad, you're good. You're a predator, you're not a predator. You're a sexual assaulter or you're a good person. Um, and I think that that is because of a lack of understanding of consent and all of the ways that it can be violated on that spectrum. It's not just like yeah, the clear cut, you know, you touched my butt when I didn't want you to touch my butt. Like that. I mean, that stuff's easier to understand. But I feel like we have to teach consent, like you're saying. Like what does it look like? I find that a lot of men just don't. They've not been taught to look for it. They've not been taught to understand what it looks like non-verbally. Um, they can understand it as like a yes or a no, but consent is much more complicated than just getting a
right,
yes or a no. Mitra Martin, I thought it was really interesting. She had drafted up these guidelines, and it was the most specific I had ever seen anybody get about what kinds of physical behavior might be considered appropriate or inappropriate. And I think that it would, I don't know, a lot of the things on it I don't know that most people would consider. So like it was listed like, rubbing or palpitating contact with your hand on their back. Like that's one I've gotten a lot that makes me intensely uncomfortable. Like kind of back rubbing or like back squeezing. It feels sexual.
sure,
Um, Holding the hug at the end for too long, like not picking up on signals that you need to let go
yeah,
a little. So yeah, like the long huggers are also very common. Um, and then yeah, not picking up on signals that I want to move out of close embrace, and so it feels like you're forcing me to be against your chest, and that also feels intensely uncomfortable.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think those are all to just list it out, like,
Yeah.
and we talk about, more people will understand. And I do like, also the our society has, like, you know basically accepting things as norm when it's really not. Like, you know also, I feel like there has to be, uh a little bit of range to what is considered uncomfortable and, like, not okay. Like, someone may be okay with being squeezed
Mm-hmm.
into an embrace,
A lot
and
of
some
people
maybe,
are. Yeah.
right, some maybe not. And uh also, like, we should, educate, uh, not just educate the ones that's, possibly doing the harm, but, like, ones also possibly getting harmed. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you feel uncomfortable, you should speak up. And, you know like, I know it's a lot harder than, harder said than, a lot easier said than done.
No, but I actually think, like, so this is where I think that like at Oxygen Tango, we took a little bit of a wrong turn. Like, we really focused on teaching people to set boundaries. Like, it's a part of our beginner curriculum. We really normalized talking about it in beginner classes, talking about it to people off to the side at practica, like having people practice saying no in a
That's
variety
great.
of different situations. But I will say, so I read this article that was about how the sort of the Me Too moment in contact improv, and when the contact improv world started to reckon with the sexual harassment that was happening there. We do have to make sure that we're like it isn't the responsibility of the people. It is more the responsibility of the group and of the people who are perpetuating harm to not perpetuate the harm, right?
Oh yeah,
Like, we want
absolutely.
to teach people to have good boundaries, but we don't want to say at all, I think, that it is on them to protect themselves.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, it won't even need to, like, you know have this talk if there wasn't people that
Right.
are
Sure.
taking advantage of the, you know I mean, whether knowingly or not, because there are people, making others uncomfortable. That's, only reason we're even talking about this. Um and, again, like, it's been normalized in our society so much. And, like, just take a look at our, the outside of Tango, like, the big, all the big, like, Me Too movement stories, like Harvey Weinstein and Matt Lauer, and those people were like, you know preying on, people for, like, years, like, if not decades. And and I think the our society and culture bears a lot of responsibility for that too. You know.
Yeah. I want to get back. So I feel like I derailed So you had said that your initial reaction to sort of when you started to waking up to the fact that this was happening in our community, that your initial reaction was emotional and punitive. So what happened? So what did it turn into? What happened next? What was the realization you had about once the emotions sort of subsided?
Um, so, first thing, once the rage kind of, dissipated a little bit, like, I realized it's not as easy or clear cut, like, approaching this issue. And I knew pretty much, like, right away that it's gonna take more than one person for sure, right? I can hold a torch, but, like, if no one's following me, then there's no point. And so I think I really, like, I mean, that's another reason to like you know uh, reason for my intention to make the group as big as possible and as like I wanted to make some noise and with some uh, like prominent members of like Tango community, and you know, of course that itself kind of like have proven to be difficult because you know not everyone, a lot of people kind of shy away because they're really worried about like that gray area. It's like there are too much gray areas. They don't want to even begin to touch it. And I certainly understand the concern, but uh, I'm not sure not doing anything is ever fixing anything, right? So we need to do something, and we just need to find the right way to do it. So I think that's like also another reason why I think this needs to be group effort. So we can kind of balance each other. Like if I'm being too emotional, someone like with a cooler head has to be there to balance me off, like balance me out. So um, I I have a lot of hope for this, and this is gonna take. I mean, I know I realize now it's gonna take some time, but as long as there are enough people uh, who are willing to tackle this and make difference, I think this can be done. And
Can we talk more about the gray area?
yeah,
Um, do you feel like that there is like definitive lines that we can draw when
I think we can definitely. Oh yeah,
sort of
sorry.
sexual, yeah, I guess like when sexual, but yeah, so what I think the gray area that we're talking about is like we all have a friend or multiple friends in Tango who enjoys sleeping with other people in Tango. Many people are coming to Tango to meet romantic
Sure.
partners. um, many, I was just in a group of Tangeras the other day where I was talking about how I do not like when people rub my back or like get too close to touching my head or anything like that. And the Tangera next to me was like, I love that. I love it when it's like cuddly and like I love that. So I kind of diverted there. But yeah, how do we because the gray area, a lot of times the behaviors that somebody who's maybe just really sexual or is having multiple sexual partners in Tango, past or present, it seems like that's where it starts, and then assault or harassment comes out of that. So how do we know the line? Like, is there a way to be really sexual and promiscuous in Tango and not be a problem?
Well, I don't know if there's like really clear line, right? That's why, you know, I think that's the reason, also reason why like we should have like pretty good range to cover all those behaviors. And if you're really thinking and have a right mind for it, like I don't know, I would be like more careful than not, right? To stay out of that trouble area. Like, and I think you can be, um, I believe you can do both. Like, you can, like, um, you can be like sensual and going after somebody, like, what, your whatever, like sexual interest without making someone uncomfortable. I'm not saying like every time you're gonna find yourself right, uh, but there's a safer way to do that. For example, when you, let's say, make a move and you get a, anything less than yes, then you should kind of give up right then, right there. But I think problem, I heard a lot of stories, and people don't take no for an answer. Like, I think, I mean, it's, it's 100% like, you know, guys making move on, you know, girls, and they say like most of inappropriate things to my mind,
Yeah.
but on the dance floor, like, I mean, you're already vulnerable. I think that's what makes tango beautiful, is you can be vulnerable, but once you cross that line, say something inappropriate, you kind of like ruined it already. And
Yeah.
then, like, to add to that, make the matters worse, like, you know, it may not be like she may not spell it out for you, like no, right? But like, I think anyone with a brain kind of like should understand what other forms of no means,
But I
right?
think, yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Like, that's the thing that I find that men don't understand about women, which is that consent actually looks like really enthusiastic consent. Like, if you're getting consent that feels like tepid, shy, hesitant, like, that's the thing that you want to look out for. Like, I can't, so I, especially when I was a beginner, um, and when things would happen that made me uncomfortable, I would do nothing because I would be like kind of frozen, right?
Right.
Um, so yeah, there was no that came out of my mouth, and I didn't even do anything physically to like stop it. But honestly, it was because like I couldn't, because I was like just kind of like I'm a freeze person in the fight or flight kind of diagram. Like, I tend to freeze. So
You and a lot of people, by the way.
yeah, and so I think maybe that's what it is. Maybe we need to start using the word enthusiastic consent. Like,
Yeah, I
at the
think that's a
same
good
time,
idea.
yeah, like as somebody, if you sit there and you really think about it, you know what it looks like when somebody's really into something. But we also have this kind of toxic understanding of women's sexuality that they have to be pursued, they have to be convinced. Like, there's supposed to be this period where I'm talking her into it and I'm convincing her because she's not allowed to just want it, so I've got to talk her into it. And and a lot of times that's, people are talking about actual sex, but I think that that's actually how it's working, like in the parameters of the tango embrace and what kind of touching someone wants and what they don't. Like, yeah, like, have I had a tando where like somebody was starting to like it felt sensual and like I liked it, so like I indicated with my body like I'm into it, like keep going. um it's that area where men don't recognize like that a woman is frozen up, or just like kind of isn't feeling, just isn't, yeah, like in a lot of ways it's been socialized to not make a scene, to prioritize your feelings over her feelings. um and especially in tango where there's like so much status, like, and it's so hard to feel like you fit in, it's really hard to do that with somebody that you perceive as having already fit in and already has a lot of status. Like, there's just a lot built into you to not upset that person.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, yes, I mean, this is also a reason why we need a lot of education. Like, we need to educate the mass, and because
Yeah.
a lot of people truly don't understand, and they're so conditioned to, not taking no for an answer, whether it's like verbal no, or like, you know, like tension in the embrace no. Like, I mean, if it's I think it just need to be a little more sensitive to what others are feeling and what others are trying to tell you, like, or flat out telling you, like, there should be no further discussion if word no comes out of someone's mouth. But even then, some people like, there's a song lyric that I hate the most. You know, you say no, but your body say yes. Like, what song is that? So gross. Uh, so I think that's like real world mentality for some people. Like, no, there's no such thing. Like, if someone says no, you better knock it off.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, think about like when you see scenes of like, yeah, like any like it's just how many scenes there are in books and songs and movies of what it looks like for a man to seduce a woman or to get a woman's consent. It's always that the woman is reluctant and the man has to talk her into it a little bit.
yeah, I mean,
That's so fucked up. That's so
yeah.
fucked
So,
up.
so again, it's the culture that like that's been like, you know, passed down to generations after generations, and like, I mean, it changes is painfully slow, but I feel like we're definitely, you know, overdue to do something about it, and um, yeah.
So what's the all right, so you learn of the problem, you sort of have your like wake up moment about it. You have your initial emotional reaction, which is anger. It makes you want to sort of root out everybody and punish them. Then we realize that like that's kind of born out of emotions, is not actually going to help anybody. So I think what we're talking about now is the need. Um, we definitely need like an education and a cultural shift in tango. But in the meantime, what do you think? And maybe you already made some headway on this at Warm Embrace. Like, what does a process look like in which somebody can address? Let's say it's one of the more minor. Let's say it's something like more minor, like um, um, you know, we left a what would be a more minor one? Like, you're consistently like putting your hand on my lower back, and I don't like it, and I don't feel like you're listening to me. Like, what does a process look like in which somebody might have the support of an organizer of the community somehow to address this? What does that look like?
Well, so I think it's the general the I think the rule of thumb is what the consequences has to uh, level with the uh, the violation, right? The crime. I don't want to call it crime because we're not like in um,
The
you
harm.
know, right? The yes, harm. That's a good word. Um, but only based on there is a uh, recognition. Like if it is, if you when you're confronted, you've done something wrong or you made someone really uncomfortable. Like, do you recognize that you're doing this? That has to be that has to come first. And then when you accept that, like when you recognize that you're doing something harmful to others, then we should have like range of consequences that are, universally accepted. Just like we have universal like strict code of conduct and guidelines of what is appropriate and what is not. So we should have range of consequences, that organizer has at his or her disposal, and that community kind of agrees to.
Okay, so what might that initial confrontation look like? So do you see it as looking like the organizer approaches the offender one on one? Does it look like a meeting between the offender and the person who was harmed? What do you think?
So I think the most ideal picture would be uh, there's a mediator, which can organizer can serve as a mediator, or it can be more than one person. I think it actually it's better if there's if more than one person. So like say like Oxygen Tango, you know, you organizer and there's maybe a couple board members or like key members of community. So those three people serve as a mediator, and then uh, you know accused and accuser. So it will look like a restorative justice kind of meeting, you know. So there's a mediator, then there's someone making claim, and someone who is being accused of like certain harm. And I think that's really healthy if it can happen. But I'm sure like I'm not sure if it will always be that way because you know someone will could approach the organizer with on the condition of anonymity, like she wants to remain anonymous, right? She
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want to make a big scene, and she just wants it to stop, right? Then I think you like really need to respect that and honor that, and then it will be just two-party meeting.
Yeah.
And I think um again, like even if you are you know like almost sure, I could see that happen, like I saw that coming, he has a reputation or whatever. Even if that's your preconception, you should stay open-minded and do your due diligence as an organizer and as a mediator, and investigate like what happened, if there is like people to ask around, and do that. And and at minimum you should hear both sides, right?
Yeah.
Then you should come to this determination. And um and I mean it can be difficult, of course, like you know if there's no agreement in both, with between parties, then it becomes really difficult, like.
Yeah, and at least in my limited experience in handling these incidents, like there is, of course, not agreement. And part of the, at least in my opinion, the reason why there's not agreement is again, we have this very black and white idea of what sexual offenses look like. So somebody that considers themselves a good person cannot admit to having caused somebody harm in that way because again we've set the whole thing up that makes them, that there's something really wrong with them, that maybe they're going to be turned away forever. So it seems like we have like a ways to go, and kind of like it seems like we have to maybe change that first, like making this like a collective problem that we're all dealing with and a cultural issue that is affecting both the offenders and the victims, and making, I don't know, I have no idea how to do this, James, but it has to be more socially acceptable to own up to it. Right now I
Sure.
don't find that
Right, I
the
agree with
majority
you.
of men can even contemplate that they have caused that kind of harm, although the majority of the men I know must have, because the majority of the men that I've been intimate with have had some, at least some small misunderstanding of what consent looks like. So this is a very widespread issue, and so, but that's the thing that I don't have. I think that that's the only way that makes this sort of mediation process, this transformative justice thing, possible, is if you have the trust of the community that people can own up to mistakes and they're not
Yeah.
branded as a sexual assaulter for the rest of their lives.
Right. But so two things. What's considered uncomfortable and harmful can be very subjective. Like as we talked about, like just because someone, likes being like hairbrushed and, like held, on lower back, like
Hmm.
with the embrace, that doesn't mean everyone else is okay with that, right?
Yeah.
So you really should understand, like, you know, like I had no issue doing this like with anyone else. Like I don't understand why this is an issue, but like everyone should understand that, and we should make everyone understand that it can be very subjective. Like if I if I tell you I'm offended by something you said or something you did, like it's not you for you to decide like it was offensive or not. Like I
Right.
am offended, right?
Right.
So that should be enough. But I know like it's in human nature to like not accept that. Like there has to be like clear uh line that applies to every like incident and everyone, which there isn't.
Yeah.
Like so it's really important that everyone understand like there is a subjective line that can move like between top range and bottom range. And if someone tells you that it's making her uncomfortable, then you should just accept that. And and you're exactly right too. Like it's important that we create the environment where like say minor like minor offense, like minor like incident just shuns you out of the community forever. Like so we need to build an environment that you know that's understood by like everyone, every member of the community, that like just because you're accepting something uh you know done by you was like hurtful or made someone uncomfortable, that doesn't mean we're gonna cancel you out of this community forever.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's important to have like sort of a book, like it's like a literary book. Like we kind of like started writing this, like starting from code of conduct and the protocols, like detailed protocols of like how to deal with as an organizer, volunteers and DJ and teacher, and how to deal with when someone approaches you with like and reporting on an incident, how to deal with those things. And I think the more detailed, the better it is, because
I agree.
chances are like we're gonna run into all like whole array of different issues, and you know,
Yeah, and I would say like I think I said this last time, but people ask us a lot like how can like as organizers, people are like how can we help? How can we help? What do you need help with? Like this is something I actually need help with. Like this is something that has to be done by the community. It can't be done unilaterally by me. I cannot make these decisions on my own. I'm not
right,
qualified. Like I cannot do it.
right.
Let me ask you. So I want to ask one more question, sort of on this topic, and then just circle back around to like the Warm Embrace Initiative and what actually happened there. Okay, so what if it's more major? What if it's like two members of your community um, at a tango event? There's drinking. They go home with each other, and one of them is accusing the other of um, assault of either I was too drunk to consent or I was too afraid to say no, and I feel that you forced yourself on me. What do we? What do we do there?
Yeah, again, it's really like minimum is difficult, and you know most it's impossible decision for one person to make, right?
Yeah.
And I've made those decisions concerning my own event. I mean, that's fine. Like, and I didn't make those decisions publicly. So maybe that's one thing that can be done. I don't know that's the best answer, but at least in case I'm wrong, right? Like, so I banned some people, like I banned few people. I don't want these people in my event. And that's something as an organizer for my own event that I can do. That's something I have at my disposal. Uh, but I didn't publicly announce unless I'm like 100% sure that there's like, you know, there's a clear evidence and or admission that something happened, like I've done something, right? Then I have no issue announcing that this person is not going to be here for this reason. But anything short of that, I think, even if you're almost sure, I think you should really take a look at like due diligence. Again, that's like given. You have to like do everything possible to investigate and research what happened, and minimum hear from both sides, and then come to your own decision. And if you're not sure about 100% sure, not 100% sure about your decision, then you should approach it with like a lot of empathy and be as discreet as possible. So like if you're not comfortable having the perpetrator at your event, like the accused at your event, then that's something you should do and you could do, but do it discreetly. So in case like you're wrong about that person or what happened,
Yeah, and
then
doing it non-discreetly possibly has legal ramifications. I mean, it starts
that
getting
too.
into a question of whether it's slander.
Well, so I've done a lot of like, so this one specific incident, there was a police report, so that makes it a little easier for me to. And my again, I try to be open-minded, but the statistics show that women don't come forward with the stories. Like they have a lot more to lose just simply by coming forward with the stories, whether it's true or not. Like some I'm not gonna say, I'm not saying it doesn't happen that people make up stories and for whatever reason, like someone has like grudge against somebody and then like I'm gonna this is my way of get back at you, right? It happens, but
Rare.
not even close. Like the data shows that most reported case, I mean, it's underreported. If
Yeah.
anything, it's like vastly underreported, because women simply, you know, like feel shamed, just being victimized, and they don't come forward, and they rather hide it and you know live with it than coming forward with a like story and get some justice. And um, so I tend to believe if someone's accusing someone of like such a, I mean, it's a really serious thing. And
Yeah.
um, I don't know how I'm getting here. Um, I got distracted
That's
with like,
okay. Um, yeah, it seems like so. I'm seeing sort of a path unfold. I mean, so it seems like the first thing is just people like we just need more understanding of what consent actually looks like and the spectrum of consent. Um, we need an understanding of the sorts of physical behaviors that people can find threatening or inappropriate. Um, then it seems like as organizers, we need to start understanding what a transformative justice process looks like and how to carry it out in our community, which is going to take quite a bit of training, I think, but it's out there. I'm so curious. I want to talk after this, but I know it's something Ellie knows a lot about, but I want to know what the like intro book is to read about transformative justice. And then I think the third step is it seems like the community needs to come together, decide what its code of conduct is, and then decide what processes are going to be taken if those things are violated, which I guess is kind of part of the transformative justice.
Yeah. We talked a lot about, setting the guidelines and define what what constitutes as violation and not, and what happens afterward. Like something happens, what happens afterward. But I think it's also important to point out, when you have all those like tools ready to deal with, like if something happens, but it's also important that just by having those things and just by simply having conversation about this issue, I think the deterrence factor is huge. Like if you go to a place and, for example, like there's like no guns allowed sign, you're gonna think twice about bringing your gun. Like it's
Right.
not gonna stop you physically, right? But it puts like enough thought in your head, like, oh, I should be careful coming in here. Same logic, I think. Like when you post code of conduct in front of, like, at the entrance, like every manga, every event, you know, just by glancing at it, like, okay, so I should behave, like I should be more careful. And I think that almost preventive and like a deterrence factor, like,
Mm-hmm.
is more, I think it's a lot more than what we realize.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's a lot. I don't know how you feel about this, but there is a significant difference to me in energy of an event in which is role switching and in which gender roles are less specific
Mm-hmm.
versus an event where it's mostly men leading and mostly women following. There's a significant I don't know how to talk about it in any kind of concrete way. I just know that I am relaxed in a way that I am not. Like at an event where there's people of both genders leading and following, I am relaxed in a way that I am not at an event where gender and role is really closely tied.
Mm. That's
Um,
interesting.
I'm more on alert, I guess, for that kind. I'm expecting that behavior more. I mean, I'm sure that that's a red herring in a lot of ways. I mean, you know, assault and these kinds of things can happen anywhere. But I do feel like that there's a way in which a dynamic of an event in which men have a lot of the power and control, like it seeds this behavior more, I think. And I think that when women are empowered to dance both roles and when men are also empowered, not just women to lead, but also men to follow, it just seems to shift that that dynamic of like woman as prey and man as predator, like yeah, the woman as like an object that I must convince to be sexual with me somehow. Like I'm
Yeah.
not speaking about it in a very articulate way, but it seems connected and I don't know how it's connected, but I think I am ready to say, like, I think it goes a long way in changing some of the dynamics that lead to this behavior simply just by encouraging people to role switch.
I think it makes sense in a way that, uh, so men leading and women following, that's more traditional gender role, like not just in Tango, right? Like in our society for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it wouldn't surprise me that you go into environment like that, like, and then you you're kind of like what you're conformed like over many years of your life kind of naturally kicks in. I was like, oh, this is like quote unquote natural environment.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, it's like men dominating and like women being dominated.
Submitting. Yeah.
Right, submitting, yes. So in that sense, I think it makes sense what you're saying. Um,
So is there anything else that you want to say about like warm embrace, like the work that you guys did or what you discovered or what you're planning for it or anything?
so as as I mentioned in the other session, like the the pandemic kind of like put everything to halt now. So nothing. It's been kind of idling, and we haven't really done anything. And but I wanna get things a little like back, started back again. And uh, so one of the things that I'm doing is I'm I'm working on a Tango information website with Chris Tran, and so we're collaborating. And one of the things, it's not just like for that purpose, but one of the things we want to incorporate into that is to create a like sort of like certified like so we'll run the website on membership basis, and we'll bring in like teachers, DJs, and so we'll have kind of like a certified like DJs and teachers with great reputations and years of like just actions, not just like, oh, that trust me. Like, so we'll be very careful with the selection process. And also we'll once we have the agreed upon code of conduct, we'll have them agree to uh, promoting that like throughout their services or into different communities. So to get the like message out, and like to have like help like um, growing the group and the move sort of like movement. Um, um, and then you know like I want to get together with some people and work on the book, like sort of guide Tango organizes guidebook of like how to deal with these situations. And if you Google and uh, other social dancing communities, like swing is a really good one. They have really robust guidelines set up, and it seems like widespread out there, like swing dance community. So like we're pretty far behind compared to other
Yeah.
dance communities in that
Yeah, they just have a
regard.
lot more infrastructure in so many ways. Yeah.
Right. I think that having that infrastructure is very important, because otherwise, like, it'll be all over the place, kind of like how this country dealt with the COVID situation.
And
Like,
is this specifically like about like sexual harassment and assault, or are you envisioning it being also addressing racism, ableism, you know?
so, uh, for so far, uh, I'm focusing on the sexual harassment and, uh, you know, but any sort of harassment, physical and emotional. And I think racism kind of falls into that category too.
Yeah.
So we can definitely expand on that. But I feel like uh, I don't I don't feel like I'm adequately, not that I'm claiming to be, adequate about, you know, sexual harassment either. But to me, that feels more like imminent threat because, like, it's been happening. I mean, not that I'm not saying, I just simply don't know. Like,
Mm,
you know, a lot of uh, racist activities happening in Tango,
mm,
and that's harming others. Like,
mm,
um, but this is at least something I've seen, like
mm.
with and experienced myself, and so I feel like uh, feels I feel it feels like more imminent and urgent to deal with this. Um, that's being said, I'm not, like, of course, like, if racism or otherwise, you know, if there's an issue that we should deal with it. And um, I just simply don't know enough about it yet. So I've been kind of like, just, you know, what's going on in our society lately. There's a lot of, like, call for, racial justice and police reform and that sort of thing. So I've been reading up on it to better educate myself. And um, yeah, so that's something could be adapted later on, but that's not something I'm focusing on at the moment.
Yeah, and
So
I think that it's interesting because so in the anti-racist Tango organizing group that I've been working with, you do start to see the ways in which all of these things overlap, but they are separate, specific issues that require like a pretty big investment of time to thoroughly understand. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, they all, at least in my opinion, coming from sort of a root cause, which is sort of the root like yeah, there's just huge issues in American culture, um, and it's something that I've started to come to understand as aspects of white supremacy culture, and I know that that's a really alarming like kind of buzzword. But when you start looking at like the way that people break down, again, it's this spectrum. Like people think of white supremacy as like Klansmen in robes, right? When really it's about all of the sort of subterranean, harmful cultural forces that have been in place since our country was founded that helps keep certain, basically, like, it helps keep groups of people oppressed
right.
and from having power and resources.
Minorities, women,
Minorities, women,
women, and
non-gender conforming, I mean, all of it.
yeah,
Um, So yeah, it seems like at some point, like we need to join forces. It seems silly to have two separate like task forces on this, but I think that'll probably come out in the wash. And again, I do think that like having immersed myself in the issues of racism in Tango, and as somebody who's been immersed in it, like it is a much bigger problem than I certainly thought. Like I was very surprised by the depth of the issue. Um, I do think, yeah. I mean, I think that the sexual harassment and assault, it's more visible, and I think
sure.
possibly even possibly causing more harm. I don't know. I guess it feels weird to like stack the two things up like that. Um, I don't really know where I was going with that. But anyway,
Me,
yeah. At some point, yeah, to understand like sexual harassment assault, like you have to talk to a lot of women, you have to talk to a lot of people that have experienced it, you have to get your head around like how is it actually showing up, what are people dealing with, why are our spaces set up in a way that's allowing this to happen? Um, what's the culture that we're all collectively creating that this is happening a lot? Like it's happening a lot. The the gray area behavior is happening a lot. Um,
I think there are enough people that concerned by this and care to make the difference, but like there are also enough people who just like to, you know, keep it quiet. And uh, so their good time does, at every night and each event is not disturbed by the noise.
yeah, what do we do about that?
Uh, yeah, yeah, I don't know. It's like again, I think enough people come together, make enough noise, and eventually they will follow the suit.
Yeah,
Um,
that's my thought too. I think I vacillate wildly. Be like, we have to go convince those people. We have to like convince those people why they're wrong and why they should be thinking. But like, it's the more I get into this, the more it seems like no, just leave them in the dust. Like create the events you want to see, and if they want to have their traditional events where people are getting groped and like racially harassed, like
okay, so
they're gonna do it.
again, like I myself was super ignorant and I was fine with seeing as is because well, simply I didn't know and I didn't care to know. Like, how could I care to know if I didn't know? Like,
Yeah,
I was also raised in and shaped in like uh, misogynistic, chauvinistic culture, and like so it's a good like uh like awakening for me that I mean I wish I had learned a lot like in subtle way, but it's kind of good thing that hit me like with like really like gruesome like uh the, yeah. But so people will people change. Like I believe that, and well, there are some people
you're more
that will never
optimistic
change.
than me.
No, there are some people that will never change. Like there are people that are hopeless, and we should leave those in the dust for sure. But vast majority of people do change, I believe, and I can speak for myself at least. I you know I've done like pretty bad things in my life, but I've learned from it and changed. And
Yeah, I will say like I would not have imagined. I mean, after the Me Too thing, it made conversations like this more common. But yeah, we didn't. I didn't talk to men about things like this. Like you talked to other women about things like this, and
right,
so that was part of the weird thing about the Me Too movement was all of a sudden I was having these conversations with men that like I had only ever had with women before, and it was also like it was a little annoying because it like honestly when it's something that you're very familiar with and has like really impacted your life in a lot of ways for someone else to be like sort of wide-eyed and just figuring it out now, like you're glad but you also feel a little bitter about it.
well,
Like
sure,
where have you been? But yeah, so that's progress. Like that's very clear progress just in my life in the last few years. So
right. So it's very similar thing. We can create that kind of environment in Tango and or otherwise, right? Like, but it will take time, and you know, it took me long enough to come. Like, it took me literally 10 years in spending in Tango to realize like this shit going down. Like, and I had no idea. So we should put spotlight on these things, and we should bring up the like topic, and you know have people talk about it.
Yeah.
And um, yeah, so but we can't force people like to learn like overnight. Like I mean, we should grant them because everyone learn at their own pace, and I know it can be frustrating, but like you can only it's not very productive to like forcing people to convert overnight, like at your pace and not their pace, because that will only push them further back into their corner. And
Yes, this has been a really hard lesson for me to learn. I
yeah,
have,
that a lot of that's going on in our society right now. Like
yeah,
people really people when they're told they're wrong and you should like wake up right now,
yeah,
people naturally dig in rather than like, oh, it's like I should think about this. No, like being defensive is not very productive.
yeah, yeah. That's funny because that's something I've actually been thinking about really acutely in just the past couple days. Like, I've been doing a ton of anti-racism training and workshops and just really immersing myself in it because yeah, I had my own kind of wake up moment um, at the beginning of the summer, just like a lot of people did. Um, and yeah, I have a lot of like anger and like grief and at the same time like if yeah, and it feels really good to like be mad at the people who haven't figured it out yet. And at the same time I have to remember like 6 months ago I didn't know any of this shit and I wasn't talking about any of it and I wasn't doing anything about any of it, so it's pretty shitty to like get on a high horse about like what I'm doing versus what other people are doing. And somebody in this workshop that I just took last night was talking about how it's better to redirect that anger at the systems that are in place that makes these things happen as opposed to any individual and where they're at with how they understand it and what
Right.
they're doing about it. And that has been, yeah, a big revelation and kind of helped me to understand how I just haven't understood how to handle people who I feel like should be caring and should be doing something about this and are just saying like, not only am I not doing anything about this, I don't think that there's a problem at all. And I'm the person who I'm the one on Facebook like yelling at them, right? And getting
Yeah.
absolutely nowhere and not doing anybody any good. Um, so I think what you just said was really wise and spot on, and also a lesson that is very hard personally for me to swallow, that I have to keep checking in with
Well,
and thinking about.
I had to learn that hard way myself too. So also like I'll point out, like I take it even further. So I think we should also pay a lot of attention to uh, dissent. So this this environment, mostly political environment, uh, people really focus on finding things, whether it's book or article or whatever, like finding things to confirm their already formed belief.
Yeah,
And I think it's really important that we leave a little bit of room for dissent and like, um, like the opinions of, you know, people who believe otherwise, right? I'm not talking about like nonsense. I mean, there's a line, right? Like I'm
Yeah,
not
like
talking.
I guess I don't want to tolerate like there's no dissent to me about women feeling unsafe in Tango. Like that is happening, that's a fact. Like I don't know that I welcome dissent about that. And
Maybe maybe
I don't know how that relates to what I just said about like having compassion of where people are at. I guess I don't want to I'm not going to like to tolerate somebody telling me that it's not true or that I'm making it up or that whatever. I can be tolerant of somebody who like just still hasn't wrapped their head around it yet, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that? Should like what do you mean by tolerating dissent?
no, I'm not saying tolerating. I didn't say tolerating. I What I said was you should at least investigate what those are. And I'm
Yes.
not talking about those nonsense. For example, like QAnon, like Democrats are eating babies. Like, okay, so no, not that. So
Yeah.
you can pretty much disregard like right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
But if someone's looking at the same situation or like same issue at a different angle, they're not saying you're wrong, but what about this angle?
Yeah.
And I really try hard because I'm like, I, you know, I used to be super emotional about like a lot of things. And, but then if I don't know if there is a different angle or like some people are looking at the same thing I'm looking at from different angle, if I don't know that, there's no like me convincing others. I, you know, so um, I'm not like articulating very well here, but to uh, bring someone into your camp, like bring an enemy to your camp. Like I don't want to call enemy because that just defeats the whole purpose of this. But to bring someone from another camp to your camp, you need to know what's going on in the other camp pretty well.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like this, like saying like keep your friends close but enemies closer. And
Right.
so I think it's really important that you are one open-minded and two understand what others are saying about the same issue in different ways, different angle from different angle. And it may not change, like it may not move your position at all, which is fine. That just like uh uh affirms that what you believe is like what you believe, right? Like now you heard the other side, but you still believe what you believe. And you know, I would argue that that only makes your belief stronger. So the purpose is not to change what you believe necessarily. I mean, if that happens, then maybe there's a whatever different angle that others are looking at the same thing
Yeah.
from. Uh, but just to understand, what, because I mean, even looking at the um, racial justice and especially associated with the police and brutality, we know there's a most know that there's a racial injustice, like systemic racial injustice in this country. With this country was built on it, right? Like so, and we also know that uh, there is police brutality going on. Like we watched a lot of videos
Yeah.
um, and I watched some more because that's what I was doing. Like I was reading a lot of books, like white fragility, like people's history of America, and like I read like 3 4 books um, on racial justice, racial issue. But then, I started listening to podcasts on different angle. Like, for example, Coleman Hughes and John McWhorter and uh, Sam Harris. You
Mhm.
know, those are all smart people. Like, mind you, two
Mhm.
of them are black, and
Mhm.
so who am I to say like their opinion is not valid? They're just looking at the same issue from different angle, and especially is specifically to do with what's the relation between how do we link because the racial injustice and police brutality right now is like completely linked together. But
Yeah.
those people are looking at it from different angle, like
Yeah. But
providing different data and stuff. And
it makes it hard though, because no, I agree. It's this tricky conversation, and it's similar because again, like, there's not two sides to racism. Like, it's not like you can just have an opinion that it doesn't exist or that it's not happening. I mean, you can, but I would find that not an opinion that I have to like honor or give you room for. I guess there's certainly room for differences in opinion on how that might be addressed, how it's showing up. And I feel like it's the same thing for these issues that we're talking about in Tango. Like, yeah, if I have somebody coming at me that wants to disagree with just the idea that there is, yeah, sexual harassment and assault, and just, yeah, that is happening in Tango, that's not something that I'm interested in, like, hearing that side about.
right,
But,
unless the person's completely ignorant, like how I was 3 years ago, that simply doesn't know that things going on, then we
right.
need we need to awake those people.
Do you feel like 3 years ago somebody had come to you and been like, there is this problem and we need to do something about it and I want you to do something about it, you would have been like, I don't know, I don't see that's a problem.
No, I wouldn't have said that. I would have said like present me with some like facts, because
Right.
that I would against the idea because I just simply don't know. I don't know enough to have opinion one way or like another. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't know. So educate me. That would be my default
Yeah.
attitude about pretty much everything.
Yeah. I
But
will
I
say
wasn't.
that that is not the default attitude for
Yes, I
a lot
know,
of
I
people.
know. But again, I wasn't always this way. So
True, true, true. Um, all right. Is there anything I'm missing as far as anything you want to say about warm embrace or about this topic?
no. Um, yeah, I'll be interested to. I know there are a couple like other group efforts that's happening, and you know, I don't know if you know Kelly from New York, who's in Buenos Aires, I think right now.
Is her last name like
Yeah,
Lettieri?
Lettieri,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. She and Ellie do like a thing on Saturdays, right?
I don't know about that, but yeah, they've been talking. I know that. So the Cali, found a group, kind of making like doing the same, making same effort to address, you know, sexual harassment and like gender inequality in Tango and things like that. And so I I'll be curious to see if we can like
And
come up
that's a
with
group
an.
in Buenos Aires that's doing that?
No, it's in New
In New
York,
York. Oh.
and I don't know. I haven't seen noticed because I'm also part of that group. So I was mostly observing because I'm not in New York, and
Mm-hmm.
they were actually having like physical meetings before
Mm.
pandemic, and I open went to the group site and read their like the log because they
Mm-hmm.
do like type down everything they talked about, and
Mm-hmm.
they did a lot of like tangible, very productive conversations. And so I'm curious like to see if there are enough people. I know there are enough people, which is just a matter of like bringing them out of their cocoons and to create like, you know, if nothing else, just a group conversation about
Yeah.
different things. And again, that this is how we can kind of like join the effort
Yeah.
of different, promoting different things in Tango.
Yeah. Yeah, I would honestly love to see. It really intrigued me what you talked about, like how you guys were planning to act out some examples, like act out some scenes. Um, I have a background in theater for social justice, and this
Oh,
is like a
cool.
big tenet in theater for social justice. It's called rehearsing for the revolution, and it's where you actually practice the situations in which you want change and justice, and you practice like how to do that in the moment, and it
Right.
pays off so that like when you're in the moment you've already had some practice with like what to say and what to do. And
Yeah.
I
So
also think
that,
it's really powerful for people to see it and like yeah, like people need to see in front of them like here's what it looks like when like you're hearing a yes but all of the body language is saying no. Here's what it looks like when the consent is enthusiastic. Like I feel like it really both like people being able to watch it and having the opportunity themselves to practice and to act it
right.
out. Like we've found that very powerful when we were using that to start and for like teaching people how to stand up for themselves with consent.
Yeah.
And it was really helpful
So
for
that's very similar to what we had in mind. So Rebecca came up with an idea, like instead of just like doing presentation, and what if we just do role play and of like reenact possible scenario of like certain situation.
yeah.
So it's it can like visualize things for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I also feel like
yeah,
we need some data, James. Like, I feel like we need some data about the prevalence of this and how many
I
just,
agree.
yeah, like,
But that might be pretty hard to come by. And
yeah,
oh, so speaking of that, uh, like I know this may have to be led by mostly women, um, like creating support network of who's been affected. Because I mean, I know there are like a lot, right? And those people have nowhere to turn to. Uh, so they oftentimes just like it's a whisper network. It's called.
yeah,
I think we should change that. So we should create and provide a um, safe environment for those people to turn to.
yeah. The Whisper Network. I like that. Yeah, that's definitely a real thing. Yeah, I know who to stay away from in LA Tango, and I know who to warn others about because of the Whisper
Right.
Network.
That happens in every community pretty much. And so yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I agree. We have a lot of work to do.
we do, and we have a lot of time to work on things.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've been on the phone a long time.
Have we? Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
thank you for your time. Thanks for talking about it.
well. Thank you for entertaining. And I learn a lot. Like if I've talked to a lot of people by
Yeah,
now, and every time I talk to someone, I always learn something new. So,
yeah,
as case with you, and so I appreciate educating me. Like I feel like I have like way to go still, but I think it's important that you know, uh, like people willing to open their eyes and like start learning.
yeah.
That's the only way to make any tangible changes, really.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah, and thanks for letting this talk be shared. I'm assuming that are you okay with it?
yeah, I don't even remember what I said, so it's okay.
I'm not sure who if anybody will watch it or not, but I
That's
like it. I
okay.
just think it's also normalizing having the conversation publicly,
Yes,
which is a big part of it. Yeah, this does. We don't talk about these things
right,
publicly in the Tango community, so yeah, we need to. That needs to be a little bit more normal. People
yeah,
getting used to it, and I think
I agree.
you have a lot of stature in the Tango community, so I think it means a lot for people to
Yeah,
hear you
I don't,
specifically talking about it.
I don't know, but if you say so.
Well, you can be. I know, and I am saying it's.
Okay,
Yeah, it's important for people who are visible leaders and organizers to be vocal about it.
yeah. Well, we definitely need a lot more though. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So alliance is a lot more powerful than you know, like
Witch hunts.
putting people into group. Yeah. And I feel like this is where I feel hopeful about all this. Because when I first started screaming top of my lung, I met with a lot more resistance and hesitance than like let's do something here. But now that's been changing, right? Over past like year and a half.
Fuck
So
yeah.
yeah, I found a lot of people, like-minded people, who are willing to take action.
Yeah,
So
I agree. I'm right there with
that,
you. I used to feel
yeah,
very alone
yeah.
in the Tingle world for a lot of reasons.
So we can make shit happen. So
Yeah.
let's stay in touch and do something about everything we talked about.
Yeah, you got it. Keep me abreast of what's going on. I'm gonna keep up with Warm Embrace, and then we'll once the anti-racist tango organizing takes shape and it's clear how all these things fit together, we'll figure it out.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care,
Thanks for your
James.
time, Megan.
Thanks for
Nice
your
chatting with
time.
you.
Good
Yeah.
night.
Good night.